Hello and welcome to this section on NASDAQ systems. In this section, we're going to review a number of NASDAQ systems that you need to be familiar with in order to pass your exam. We're going to take a look at OATS, we're going to take a look at ACT, and we're going to take a look at the firm quote compliance system. All features and functions of the NASDAQ workstation that you need to be familiar with in order to pass your exam. The OATS system, or Order Audit Trail system, is designed to track an order through its entire life. It's designed to ensure that orders are handled and routed in a timely fashion. Every event in the order's life is time-stamped. The time when the order is received, the time when it's presented to the market, when it is executed, when it's changed, when it's canceled, or when that order expired are all events in the order's life that are going to be time-stamped by this system. Now, you may see the test present questions on OATS, or you may see the test present questions on CAT, the Consolidated Audit Trail System. The CAT system contains information regarding equity and option orders. They can test you either way on this, but they both effectively do the same thing. Now let's take a look at the OATS system a little bit more carefully, or a little bit more closely here. All OATS reports are required to be submitted by members by 8 a.m. on trade date +1. The OATS reports are the only reports that are due on a weekend. All broker-dealers are required to synchronize their OATS clock daily to within 1 second of the National Institute's for Standardized Time's atomic clock. All clocks must be synchronized daily in 1 second of the National Institute for Standardized Time's atomic clock. Now, what is submitted on the OATS report? Well, when it was received, who it was received from. Every order needs its own unique order ID. The terms of the order. Was it a buy, a sell? The number of shares, the order type. Was it a market order? Was it a limit order? How long was that order in force? Was it a day order, good till cancel, a fill or kill? What? Which market center was this order routed to? And execution. What price was the order executed at? What time? And what capacity did the broker-dealer act in? Did it act as the customer's agent, or did it act as the principal and participate in the transaction? The broker-dealers are required to stamp OATS reports in military time. So you'll see hours, minutes, and seconds, all in military time for all of these events. A good test point here is that broker-dealers are not required to submit the data in milliseconds unless they collect the data. So all broker-dealers who collect data in milliseconds must report their OATS timestamps in milliseconds, but they're not required to collect the data in milliseconds. So a little bit of a subtle test point. If they collect it, they must provide it, but they're not required to collect it. Another NASDAQ system you need to be familiar with is the firm quote compliance system. The firm quote compliance system is used by NASDAQ to ensure that market makers don't engage in a violation known as backing away. Backing away is failing to honor your firm quote. Market makers may not just fade their quotes because they don't want to execute an order. Should a firm feel that they were owed an execution and they submit a backing away claim to NASDAQ, NASDAQ will use the firm quote compliance system to determine exactly where that market maker was quoting and to determine whether or not that market maker did indeed execute an order. If the NASDAQ feels that the market maker did commit a violation known as backing away and failed to honor their quotes, then NASDAQ would provide the complaining dealer with a contemporaneous execution, and an execution at the price they would have received at the time the order was presented to the firm that failed to honor their quotes. Now, if a broker-dealer had just executed an order and was in the process of updating the quotes, well, that would not constitute a backing away violation. Only if they merely started to fade their quotes because they didn't want to trade at those prices. So here we have a market maker quoting a stock, 2025 bid, offered 2035, 2,000 shares bid for, 2,500 shares offered. Those are firm prices. If an order entry firm directed an order to this market maker to buy the stock at 2035 and the market maker simply updated their price on the offer to 2040 without executing any order, well then, that would be a firm quote violation or a backing away violation. Now, we should talk about something known as trade or fade. Now, here you have a market maker quoting a stock 2025 bid, offered 2035. Those prices and sizes are firm. They're required to honor those prices. But let's say an order is presented to this particular market maker to buy 5,000 shares at 2035. Well, the market maker has several choices regarding how it wants to handle this situation. It must sell a minimum of 2,500 shares to this order at 2035. If it sells only 2,500 shares, it must publish an inferior quote, meaning it must go up on the offer. Perhaps they would change the ask to $20.40. They would be required to get out of the way to publish an inferior quote, an offer that is higher. If the broker-dealer wanted to maintain that 2035 offer, they would be required to fill that order for 5,000 shares in full, even though they're only displaying 2,500. So a good test point there. The broker-dealer or market maker must fill the order completely if they want to maintain their current quote. If they do not fill an order presented to it completely, they must publish an inferior quote and get out of the way. Now let's take a look at ACT, the automated comparison transaction system. ACT only comes into play after a trade. The first letter in ACT is A. If there's no trade has taken place, ACT doesn't do anything. ACT put that trade on the tape and disseminated it to the marketplace. They match market participant IDs so that the buyers know they bought the stock from the seller and the seller knows they sold the stock to the buyer. And they facilitate the clearing process. They report these transactions to the DTCC so that the buyers and sellers on settlement date can exchange cash and securities. ACT does not quote or display prices or orders. They do not route orders against any quote. They don't send orders anywhere, and they do not execute. This is a great side-by-side comparison of the things that you need to know regarding ACT, what it does and what it does not do. ACT is open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. All transactions executed in the NASDAQ system are going to be reported to ACT for trade reporting to the marketplace, matching, and clearing. All transactions must be reported to ACT as soon as practical, but in no event in any time later than 10 seconds. So all transactions must be reported to ACT within 10 seconds. Now here's the deal. All trades executed electronically in the NASDAQ Market Center are automatically reported to ACT by the NASDAQ workstation. A trader does not need to go in and manually report that trade. It is done for them. ACT reporting is required when someone does a transaction, perhaps over the telephone. That has to be reported to ACT manually by the trader within 10 seconds so that the trade at the volume and the price information is reported to the marketplace on a timely basis. Once the reporting party reports the transaction to ACT, the contraparty has 20 minutes to accept that transaction. to go into their ACT trade scan function. They can look at all of the transactions that they had completed, and when they see the open transaction, they must accept it within 20 minutes, provided all terms and conditions are indeed as that trade was executed. So I would definitely know that 10-second time frame to be reported, and I would definitely know the 20-minute time frame to accept it. Now let's take a look at how trades are reported to ACT. When you have a transaction executed in a NASDAQ security through the NASDAQ Market Center execution system, it's reported to ACT through the TRF or the Trade Reporting Facility. When you are executing an order for an exchange-listed security in the third market or in the CQS, the NASDAQ Market Center for listed securities will execute that order and report that trade to ACT through the TRF, the Trade Reporting Facility. A transaction in the OTC Bulletin Board or in the Pink OTC will be executed through dealer-provided systems or third-party connectivity providers, and those transactions will be reported to ACT through the Order Reporting Facility or ORF. A good way to remember this is anytime you see OTC, OTCBB, Pink OTC, both start with O. ORF, the Order Reporting Facility, is used to report these transactions to ACT. What price is reported to ACT? The wholesale prices are reported to ACT, exclusive of commissions and markups. Saying that another way, the protected price is reported to ACT. That is what the marketplace sees going across the screen. So here we have an example where a customer purchased 1,000 shares of QWER at 25 bucks, including a 50-cent markup. That transaction would be reported to ACT as 1,000 shares at $24.50. Wholesale prices, the protected price, is always reported to ACT. Now, let's take a look at the TRACE system, the Trade Reporting and Compliance Engine. This is used for transactions in debt securities, transacted over the counter in NASDAQ. TRACE reported securities include investment grade and junk rated bonds and split rated bonds, one that may be investment grade by one rating agency and junk rated by another rating agency. Any SEC registered corporate debt, U.S. Treasuries, and those securities guaranteed by the U.S. government or by a government-sponsored entity. What is not reported to TRACE? Municipal securities, money market instruments, foreign government debt, and any development bank debt. These are not reported to TRACE. All transactions in debt securities and TRACE-eligible securities must be reported to TRACE within 15 minutes of the transaction. So it's a little more leeway here because bonds don't trade as actively and are not as time sensitive as equities are. So 15 minutes to report a transaction in a TRACE-eligible security. A TRACE-eligible security must be reported within 15 minutes, and TRACE operates from 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Most of you are going to see a question that asks you when a transaction must be reported to TRACE, and they will give you a time. If there's 15 minutes or more until the close of TRACE, that transaction must be reported in 15 minutes. So a trade executed at 6:10 p.m. would be required to be reported to TRACE by 6:25. They like to give you a question relating to TRACE reporting where there is less than 15 minutes till the closing of TRACE, and they like to ask you when that transaction must be reported. So here you have a bond trader executing a trade in a TRACE-eligible security at 6:16 p.m. Well, there's less than 15 minutes till the close of TRACE. When must this transaction be reported? By 8:15 a.m. trade date +1. Saying that another way, within 15 minutes of traces opening on the following business day or on trade date +1. Now, you should be able to get this reported by 6:30, but that's not the test point. If they ask you when you must report a transaction in a trace eligible security, when there's less than 15 minutes left, it is within 15 minutes of traces opening on trade date +1 or by 8:15, however they show it to you. Now let's take a look at the alternative display facility. This gives test takers a little bit of confusion, and let me see if I can give you a little history on this, a little background, maybe tied into some real world concepts so that you understand this. Some time ago, back in the 60s and 70s, when there weren't all these market centers where people could execute orders, NASDAQ was potentially going to be deemed a monopoly for trading and quoting NASDAQ securities. So in order to ensure they weren't deemed to be a monopoly, they offered or created the Alternative Display Facility, or the ADF, as another place people can go to display quotes for NASDAQ listed securities. Now, the ADF only displays quotes. It does not provide any execution capabilities. People who display quotes in the ADF must provide access to those quotes, electronic access to those quotes, through third-party connectivity providers or a party that provides electronic execution and communication between their quotes and another party. Now, there's some minimum requirements here, and the connectivity provider must ensure that there is no more than 2 seconds turnaround time to execute an order. So when a broker-dealer displays quotes through the ADF, they must provide that electronic access to those quotes, and it may have a turnaround time of no greater than 2 seconds. Now, the ADF versus NASDAQ. Well, the ADF is kind of another feature or function, another tab on your NASDAQ workstation, and I'm going to try and explain it to you like this. Obviously, all of us are on the internet, and when we want to go search for something, the majority of us will go to Google and search for it. But some of us still go to Bing or Yahoo to look for things. It's another way to search for information that you need. I want you to think of NASDAQ as Google, where virtually, the largest percentage of people go to search for things. And I want you to think of the ADF as sort of like Bing or Yahoo, another place you can go to search for things. Now, one is very, very widely used, that is Google or the NASDAQ in our example, and one is not used that frequently, like Bing or Yahoo, and that is the ADF. And that's how I want you to think of it, as just another window or another place you can go to see quotes. Now, I want you to be aware of the fact that only NASDAQ and third market quotes are displayed in the ADF. So only NASDAQ listed securities and New York Stock Exchange securities trading over the counter through the CQS. OTC Bulletin Board and Pink OTC stocks do not trade on the ADF. Now, a little bit more color on the requirements for the communications. The communications between participants is 3 seconds. So if someone wants to communicate with a participant in the ADF, the max time is 3 seconds. It's 2 seconds for order turnaround, but for communication it's 3 seconds. If a participant has 3 outages in 5 days or fails this test 3 times in 5 days, they will be suspended from the ADF for 20 days. ADF transactions are reported through the ADF through the TRACS system. The TRACS system reports the transactions through the ADF for transactions that are executed there. And once again, ADF securities are quoted For NASDAQ securities and listed securities traded in the third market only, no OTC bulletin board, and no pink OTC stocks. Dark pools. These are subscriber networks or crossing networks where the subscribers buy and sell large blocks of stock anonymously. The volume and who is doing what is unknown to the market center until it is reported to the tape. Electronic trading systems used by large institutional subscribers, they are subject to the NBBO rule, or the best bid, best offer. They may not execute orders that trade through protected prices. So even in these dark pools and on these alternative trading systems, the prices where the transactions are executed must be as favorable as are available in the NASDAQ Market Center, that best bid, best offer. ACEs. Many market makers want to receive order flow from perhaps their correspondent broker-dealers, the broker-dealers they clear through, or perhaps other smaller broker-dealers who are order entry firms and, as the name implies, are only allowed to enter orders into NASDAQ. They cannot quote. In order to encourage order entry firms and smaller broker-dealers to send their orders to a larger firm, they may grant these smaller broker-dealers access through the ACEs system. The ACEs system provides direct access to market makers' internal books, where the firms are allowed to go into the market maker's book and buy and sell securities directly with the market maker without routing the order through the NASDAQ system. Now, what you need to know about the ACEs system is the market maker may turn it on and turn it off anytime it likes. When we had the flash crash some years ago and the market was down 1,000 in a matter of seconds, you can bet every single market maker turned off their ACEs access because they didn't want to be picked off. And then when the market stabilized, they could flip it on again. So test point there is the market maker providing the ACEs access can turn it on and off for whenever they like, and can provide access to whomever they like. They don't have to provide it to everyone, only those they wish to provide it to. Also, the market maker who provides the ACEs access is the person who pays NASDAQ the ACEs fees. So be aware of that ACEs feature, because virtually all of you will see a question on that. Now, I want to talk about directed orders and preferenced orders. A preferenced order is one where the party entering the order into NASDAQ states which market maker they prefer to send their trade to. Now, if a person enters an order into NASDAQ, the NASDAQ system is going to route it to the best quote and whoever got there first. Okay, so it will be automatically routed based on time and price. Now, if a broker-dealer prefers to trade with a particular market maker because maybe they get a rebate for order flow, they can, on the order system, dictate who they want to send that order to. That is a preferenced order. We prefer to trade with Charles Schwab, or we prefer to trade with Bank of America Merrill. You put that information in the order and it routes it to that market maker. Now, it's important to note that the market maker you preference in your order must be on the inside market. So if you're buying the stock, they must be on the inside offer. If you're selling the stock, they must be on the inside bid. If they are away from the inside market, the order will be rejected. A preferenced order is a liability order. A preferenced order is a liability order, meaning the market maker is obligated to trade at that price for up to its displayed and reserved size. A directed order may be a liability order, or it may not be a liability order. If the market maker is on the inside market, it is a liability order. If the market maker is away from the inside market, it is not a liability order. A person may ping IM, a market maker, buy 5,000 at so-and-so price, do you care? And if the market maker is away from that price, the market maker is not obligated to honor that order. Let me give you a little bit more detail there. Let's say the stock is $25 bid, offered $25.05, and an order entry firm directs an order to market maker 1 wanting to buy 1,000 shares at $25.05. But the firm, market maker 1, is not offering the stock at $25.05. In this case, that's not a liability order. The market maker can just reject it, no thank you. Another way that a directed order is not a liability order, maybe the stock is $25 bid, offered $25.05, and an order entry firm pings or instant messages a market maker, who perhaps it's market maker 1 again, and they are offering the stock at the inside offer of $25.05, and they want to buy the stock at $25.02. Well, that's 3 cents under the market maker's offer. Therefore, they are not obligated to fill that order. They may ask you, when does a market maker's firm quote liability begin? What is the triggering event? It is when the order is presented to it for execution. When an order is presented or directed to its quote for execution. That is when the market maker's firm quote liability begins. Okay, we just did a great review of a lot of the NASDAQ systems you're going to be required to be familiar with on your test. Virtually all of you are going to see this on your exam. We would like to invite you to take a look at the cheat sheets we have in our video course at the end, as well as the cheat sheets we have in the end of our book. Those will help you a lot, certainly as it relates to some of these NASDAQ systems, and we'll see you in the next section.